Hmm.
Yaniv,
Oh,
welcome to
hey,
the show.
thank you.
Good to have you here.
Ah, good to be here. I'm just trying to notice what it's like now that we've pressed the record button, um, and see if anything is different for me. And it feels like a tiny jump up in excitement and nervousness. Not a big one. Like I'm surprised by the amount.
Mm. And I think the more we get into the conversation, at some point we'll both forget that this is being recorded. That's what usually happens.
That would be interesting.
Yes, yes. And before we dive into the conversation about authentic relating and the work you do, I always start with a warm up question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
I do. And honestly, I think that listening to your podcast and listening to this question many times actually helped me ground this. Um, yeah, because for a while I was like a coach or, like what do authentic relator, all this stuff came up, but actually my big passion is taking groups through experiences. And what is that if not facilitation?
Mm.
And also facilitating, and we can get into that. What's facilitating also um, invades my life, and my
Ooh.
relationships, if that makes sense.
As a consequence of you practicing facilitation. So you mean you now facilitate your relationships more or the conversations you have?
uh, I mean, this is a big topic, so I'm trying to be kind of concise in it, and if we want to get in more, we can. I just Yeah, this is the effect of also being recorded, right? And, hey, editor, thanks for doing this. Uh, so I think authentic relating, whenever we get into that, is the art of facilitating connection.
Mm.
So that's why it's like facilitating inception. It's like facilitating. How do we facilitate this? How do we co-facilitate our conversation, right? How do we
Yeah.
make it easier for both of us to bring ourselves fully?
Yeah. I love that. And it reminds me of one of the improv principles. Actually, two of the improv principles. One is yes ending. So acknowledging what the other person has said and brought to the space and building on that instead of nullifying it or ignoring it. And the other principle is to make your partner look good at every moment.
Exactly. Exactly. Make your partner look good. Um, because if you don't make them feel good
Mm.
in the conversation, then they're not gonna feel safe to actually share, to actually bring what's real and what's true for them.
Yeah, true. It's more about, yeah, on stage in improv, it's about looking good. But what it actually is, as you say, it's feeling good and feeling safe. And then interesting stuff happens.
Definitely. Uh, More stuff like is revealed.
Yes. How did you get into authentic relating? And maybe before we go there, what is it actually for those in the audience who might not be familiar?
Well, audience, welcome to Authentic Relating. I'll give you the elevator pitch because every time people ask me this question, I have a new answer. But that answer can be very convoluted. So I also have the elevator pitch, which is it's a set of practices that is meant to facilitate deeper, more meaningful connections with yourself and with others. With yourself, because you have a relationship with yourself, right? You
Mm.
relate with yourself. um, and then how to bring that out to others. And what would be an authentic relating move right now to illustrate that is that saying this elevator pitch, I feel a little bored because I've said this elevator pitch so many times. And at the same time, I know it's efficient. Yeah.
Isn't it funny that we are so often told that we need this elevator pitch? And then we sit there and we formulate it and we sharpen it and we get it more straight. And the moment it comes out of our mouth, it loses the impact because it doesn't come from our heart anymore, because it's just too perfect.
100%. And I think what has helped me with that, interestingly, is doing poetry slam
Mm,
because because this is, a songwriter, for example, performs the same song many, many times, hundreds of times, and still makes it feel alive,
true.
right? So creating a work of art is what I strive towards. And sometimes I'm like, all right, just let the elevator, this will be enough right now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So to maybe dig deeper in what's behind the elevator pitch, what does authentic relating mean to you and how do you use it?
Oh, what a question, Miriam. I'm noticing that I'm excited to explore this right now with you specifically because, yeah, I have this sense that you um, get me.
Mm,
Um, and I feel safe with you. And even though maybe hundreds of people are listening right now, it still feels very, very intimate and very safe for me to explore something that's close to my heart, like the closest thing to my heart I can imagine. So thank you for this question.
thank you.
And I would say that for me, authentic relating is a kind of like the tool that I am able to wield love through. I see your look.
Can you
It
tell
means
me
that,
more?
yeah, I will. Um, so I have inside of me this overwhelming energy that is, for me, best described as love. Um, and authentic relating has been the most meaningful and useful tool for me to be able to shape it and wield it and express it um, in a way that impacts others in a way that I want it to impact others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to
How's
me,
that to hear?
I can relate to that. And I can, knowing you and having met you as a facilitator and a participant and a conversation partner, um, I see how this comes true in everything you do. And there's a part of me that wonders where the audience will understand what you mean by that.
I have trust in the audience to understand, and I appreciate you bringing this part. And it makes me curious of what what would be like what in your eyes, because I trust you as the person that's done this hundreds of times, and what would be the part that you think would be harder for people to receive? Yeah.
Mm, yeah. I think it would be interesting to understand the structure of this authentic relating. And I think we have practiced or showed it a little bit in this glimpse moment where you speak out, observing what's happening inside of you, asking how what you're sharing is impacting me, and thereby giving me the opportunity to share what's present in me. So it feels almost like bringing the inside to the outside,
Yes.
which is a very daring thing to do, because very often we only listen to the dialogues between our ears, but we rarely reveal them.
Yes. Yes. And thank you for bringing that. It makes total sense because so far, as you said, I've only been showing, but not really creating any structure around it. So thank you for naming that. And you're right. It's very vulnerable. Um, but I think Brene Brown said that vulnerability is the currency of connection.
Mm.
And I wholeheartedly have experienced that. And authentic relating gives an opportunity to bring vulnerability in a structured way, um, which is these 5 practices that authentic relating offers, teaches, and then um, invites people to practice, um, which are welcoming everything, checking our assumptions, revealing our experience, owning our experience, and honoring self and other.
Mm.
And I can spend days talking about each of them, but I thought as a starting point, just naming them would be, uh, yeah, useful for our conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I wonder whether it is the structure, the boundaries, the guidelines that help us to also lean into the space, as if once we know we have kind of a process to follow, we don't have to spend energy on that anymore, and can then fully focus on, yeah, revealing what's there and being present in the conversation.
Totally. I think, and my experience has been that when people come into an authentic relating space and workshop, they kind of have to trust me or believe me just in order to try this in the space, right? These 5 like why would this work, right?
Mm.
Why would these 5 things work? And then creating a space of what we call like the yoga of connection, because it's like a gym. It's an authenticity gym. It's a place where you practice these things to see, first of all, how you relate with them and see the impact of them.
Mm. And at the same time, I want to bring up something that I observe you doing and that I find genius, because it also
Tell me
creates a
more.
container. Tell me more. It creates a container where we also know what the boundaries are. That in your sessions, you often say, okay, we're here to be vulnerable, but we are not at the vulnerability Olympics. Because I think these kind of conversations can very quickly go into the more into the almost therapeutic or group therapy direction. And these have their place, but maybe not always. So how do you balance that? And how can you check in with the participants that they are still staying in this? Let me ask it differently. What's inside and what's outside authentic relating when it comes to this vulnerability Olympics?
Great question. And I think this is what people, because you're using this concept of therapeutic or group therapy as somewhat, I receive it in a somewhat negative way, somewhat in a way where kind of invade spaces where it's, like without even consent in a way, if that
Mm.
makes sense. And I totally understand that because I think that the way that you say it, the way it lands for me, it's about opening up too much and having being poked and prodded and analyzed in front of people, also in front of other people, and kind of pathologized and put into the DSM-5 in some way, right? And that's why I think authentic relating is it's therapeutic, but it's not therapy.
Mm.
And what's not in it is analyzing anybody, fixing them, rescuing them, changing them in some way. Like all of this stuff is not in the realm of authentic relating. We imagine that everybody is whole and resourceful and complete and doesn't need to change. Um, and that if change occurs, it will happen organically by us revealing ourselves. For example, if I'm in a connection and a conversation with you, and I start noticing that I'm judging you, and I don't feel connected to you, I have these judgments that you're like interested only in what you have to talk about and like don't have space for me or don't see me, like these judgments come up, then how do I feel? I feel disconnected from you. This is mine. Own my experience is the fourth practice. So I'm not going to say anything about you that condemns you, that you're not okay. I'm just going to share my experience. I feel disconnected from you. I notice I have some judgments about you. What's that like to hear?
Mm.
I'm giving you the agency of being like, you can relate with what I feel and share in any way. Um, I think it will be useful information for you to know that I feel disconnected from you, but you will do it with it whatever you want.
Wow. And this, it's beautiful because it's dangerous. It almost feels like these waters, we're speaking out something that usually we don't. And so internally, we're judging someone. Otherwise, we wouldn't say it. And by saying it, we trust them to deal with it in a grown-up way, air quotes, or in a responsible way. So we are putting them into the responsibility. And this can be very confronting.
Definitely. So that's why there's two things around here. First of all, like you shared before, the container. We're coming here and understanding that we're both moving, all of us coming to authentic relating, we're moving towards authenticity. We're moving towards saying things that we might not usually say in a normal conversation. So we're all both, because it's an exercise of, like, say, two people, me and you, but we're all accepting that there are things that we will say that we don't normally say and hear things that we don't normally hear, uh, to honor authenticity. That's one thing that's important for the container. And the second thing, what's the second thing? Oh, that we're serving connection. We're both trying to serve connection, because if we didn't try to serve connection, there is no point in me telling you that I feel disconnected from you or that I'm judging you.
Yeah.
I can just walk away.
Yeah. And then basically everything that I hear, as much as it hurts, is there to help me create a new sense of self-awareness. Because it is a gift actually to hear something that I wouldn't usually hear. And then I wonder, is it a practice that you would also use for, let's say, groups who are in conflict? And maybe they didn't, because I think I can see two scenarios for this. One is, as you say, people come into the space to learn about themselves. and to receive these hurtful gifts. And I think this can be extremely enriching to do it with strangers who might see you for the very first time, and then you get their perceptions unfiltered because you don't have history. But then it's also kind of safe because there's no history, there's potentially no future. And then you can just receive these gifts and take them into your real world. And the other scenario I can imagine is then there, for instance, teams or groups of people where there's conflict and they don't know how to resolve it, but they have to have a connection because, for instance, they work together. Would this tool be something that's helpful, or what are the risks?
So I think it's very helpful because I mean, we just had a corporate workshop about conflict, and this is where coming into a space of sharing my own experience in a let me backtrack for a second. Authentic relating. It's two words. It's authentic, like whatever my actual true movement is, whatever is happening inside me. Relating is understanding that there's a person on the other side, and it will be hard to, it might be difficult to receive what I'm giving, and honoring that and being tender and being gentle with my truth, which is it's a very important thing, not just for teams and corporation where I have to like sometimes tread lightly because my livelihood is at stake. In every relationship, um, that's why I think it is useful. For example, in the workshop that we just did, someone was sharing about an exercise that we were doing about listening, and and I asked what it was like to listen, and the person started to share about solutions,
Mm.
and I felt confused because I didn't understand what the share had to do with what I asked or the exercise. So I shared my confusion. I shared like, oh, I'm noticing I'm confused because I'm not sure exactly what I told you. What, because I'm hearing you talk about solution, about like what you heard, you're already processing what you heard and you're already coming up with a solution. What I wanted to hear is what was it like to listen in this way? And I think um and I know that that creates space for people to be able to welcome whatever is happening to them in a corporate relationship.
Mm.
Like if I, as a facilitator, say to someone, um, I'm feeling confused because this is what I expected and I didn't receive that. Um, what's that like to hear? You know, not putting any blame on them or not putting any expectation from them to be different, but just sharing my confusion and my state of being. There's a natural movement towards like, oh, let me clarify or let me reiterate, like um re what's the word I'm looking for? Realign.
Mm.
Um yeah, does that answer your
Yeah.
question?
How did the person react?
Um they I think I also okay, I'll say it like this. I also related because I shared my confusion. I heard their response. I asked, "How did you listen?" And they shared. I listened as a peer because we have this, and that. And then I kind of reframed it into the exercise. I was like, "Oh, so you were listening to the what? To the content that was shared, the actual verbal content that was shared." And they said, yes, I was listening to the content that was shared. And then I moved to, so did anybody listen to the how, to the other part of the exercise? Um, so there was, I created an ability for this person to receive it with grace,
Mm.
uh, which I think is important for all of us. And they did. They thanked me after, because it wasn't about me kind of sharing my confusion and like leaving it like that, which is also sometimes useful. Sometimes it's useful to let people relate with what's actually happening. But as a facilitator, I have the responsibility to also create a space of relating, especially
Mm.
in a delicate environment like a corporate environment.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for this example. I also wonder in this context, how is it received when someone is put in the spotlight like this in front of colleagues? Because I think that's a very unusual experience for many who work in the corporate sector and are more used to meetings or workshops where one person is speaking and everyone is either listening or answering to their emails.
I'm, is that a question? I
It's a
wasn't sure.
reflection, which might
Mhm.
trigger a reflection in you.
Um, It's it's again about context, I would say, because the context is we are here in a meeting where we need to listen to this person. This person has power, power dynamics. That's a whole other subject, which is so important to be able to bring yourself to be aware that we have power dynamics. Uh, like it's a normal experience to be afraid to voice myself in
Mm-hmm.
front of someone that has power over me. Um, and the only way to lower this threshold of fear is by making this explicit. And we rarely do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wonder how long it takes for, because I can imagine that there is an initial resistance, especially in a situation of conflict. Then you hear what's going on for the other person, how they relate. And then to be able to voice the resistance. And then there's resistance against the resistance and against this entire thing because it's, yeah, I think it gets us out of our comfort zone into a new context.
And this is exactly why we run these authenticity gyms
Mm.
because,
Authenticity, Jim.
yeah, because this is a practice.
Mm.
You're not going to be able to like learn about this and the first day walk to people and say like, oh, I noticed a lot of resistance to what you're saying right now. um that could be terrifying, and we're not used to talking like this. Super vulnerable. However, by practicing, by going to the yoga class, you're able to get more and more comfortable with it, and
Mm.
practicing it with people that you're more and more comfortable with. I know many people that started authentic relating in a context of personal relationships and ended up bringing it into a work relationship.
For you as a long-term practitioner and teacher, do you find it difficult to switch it off or to make the switch? Do you differentiate that sometimes you're like, this is a situation where I might stay away from my usual authentic relating practice?
Oh, that's such a fun question. So there's a few part of me. One part that's pretty loud that says, I don't want to switch it off. Like this is great. And being in a context where I can't authentically relate is draining to me.
Mm.
Um, And this is who I am. Thanks to authentic relating, I've been able to be authentic, the most authentic I've ever been able to be, and discover new parts of myself um, through communication, through connection. So I wouldn't want to turn it off. And there's another part that says, of course I turn it off. Of course I turn in many, like if I'm new to a space, if there's a big group of people, like, social situations, if I'm um, talking to authorities or, like someone that has a lot of power over me, um, I do squeeze in a little bit of authentic relating, but mostly I stick to what is,
Yeah.
not taboo. What's easy to relate with.
Yeah.
But I don't stay there too long. Yeah.
Um, to me, this used to be common situations that I fell into. And now I just switched. And maybe this, you can relate to that. So I had moments with my mom where I would ask questions and ask her to share how she feels about things. And her reply would be, "Stop facilitating me. I am not your client." And then if I just imagine me replying with, "Oh, I feel surprised by hearing that. And I wonder, and there's a part of me. What makes you say that? And what are you actually suppressing?" I think she might kill me.
So let me challenge you there, Miriam, because the way that you presented it now is very, I would say robotic. It's like, oh, this is the line, and this is the way that many people use this stuff, right? Like I saw a video on like corporate culture communication recently of like, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. It's a very like it's what I call not embodied.
Mm,
Um, because if and it's very difficult for me also to use this with my family. And at the same time, the ingredients that's missing there, I think, is emotion. Is not like, let me communicate this in a way that will be clear for you to understand. It's like, let me communicate this in a way that will impact you.
mm. And how do you, what do you mean by embodiment in this context? Because I have an assumption. I don't want to hear it from you.
Embodiment means that it's not all here. It's not all in between my ears, like you said. It's like it's in my heart. Um it's part of my natural movement. It goes through my whole body. It's a different thing than saying like, oh, I have resistance to hear this, which again is useful. But I'm imagining me being you in front of your mother and how I would react to that. And I would feel sad because I have a desire to connect with you.
Mm,
And I'm noticing I feel helpless and I'm noticing a desire to let this all go. Um, but also there's still a deep desire to connect. Um,
mm. And how can you not melt hearing this from your daughter? Thank you. Yeah, this was a very useful example.
my absolute pleasure.
And then I also now understand what you mean by saying something for the other person to understand versus to impact the other person. Because, and I think this is then, this mindset shift will also then transform the way we say it, that we will be able to say it for impact. Because if we want someone to understand, then there is this frustration because they just don't understand. But if we want to impact, then it comes
Yes.
from the heart, and we're like, oh, so this doesn't land. what else can I bring in the space? How can I bring more of me in the space so that it does have an impact? And usually, yeah, emotions have impact, whether we want it or not.
Exactly. And the thing is, and um, what's her name? Susan Campbell wrote this amazing book called um right, that I forget. Um, Susan Campbell wrote this amazing book called Getting Real.
Mm.
10 10 truth skills to like supercharge your relationships. And she talks about the fact that we mostly relate to control. Uh, like she did this experiment and she found that 80% of our communication is to control as a part of communicate. So communicate to control as a part of communicate to relate. So I could easily use the same words that I used with you a moment ago to your mother in a with an agenda to control, right? With an agenda to like make her feel bad and that she will open up to me, right? But the idea of relating is saying the stuff that is true for me, that is vulnerable, without expecting her to have um, the reaction that I want her to have.
Mhm. So without the manipulation part.
Exactly, which is very subtle.
Yeah.
It's very subtle.
And I wonder whether it's an instinct that actually makes us sense whether the other person has an agenda or not.
I would say yes. I would say that there is a feeling, an energy that comes through when you have an agenda.
And I think this is then the energy that feels us disconnected, makes us feel disconnected because we don't feel the energy of the heart, the emotions. Yeah.
This is and this is a conclusion that I've come to recently. This is all coming towards, and this is relevant to workshops so much, self-agency and sovereignty. Um, the way people will be able to show up fully and bring themselves fully is only if they have agency, full agency. And when you try to manipulate someone, you're taking away their agency.
Mm.
You expect them to have a specific reaction. And then what can they do except for either have that reaction or disappoint you?
Huh. Yeah. It reminds me. So I try to follow the rule when I ask questions that I don't ask questions when there's only one answer or when I know the answer. And I think unconsciously, or I can relate it to what you just said, because asking a question when there is only one answer, I have an expectation, it takes away agency. And then it turns the situation into an interrogation or a test. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And I hate tests. As someone with ADHD, fucking hate them.
Even
Uh,
without.
nice.
And how do you, when I think back of the context of having these authentic relating workshops or spaces where it's in a group experience, how do you close the container and prepare the participants to go back into the outside world?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that question. I
Yes.
don't know if I've asked myself this question. Um, I think the first thing that comes up as you ask this is integration, right? It's an ability to have a normal conversation about the experience that we just had together.
Mm.
Move a little bit away, not fully, but a little bit away from the authentic relating context and just have a normal conversation and a normal share of like, What was this like? What was my experience doing this? How do I relate to it? And kind of, create a concept in our minds of like, oh, this was this, and now I can relate with this. It's not like a myriad of experiences that I don't know which one I need to relate. No, it's a little box that I just created with my words that I can relate to now, that I can have a relationship with, and just present this ability and opportunity for people to be able to connect with this experience and make it meaningful in their lives.
Mm. So also to disentangle it from the emotions by, yeah, putting it a bit on the meta level or getting the group into the meta level.
I do have resistance to the disentangling it from the emotions, but definitely not putting emphasis on the emotions in
Yeah.
that moment, because people will have an emotional reaction to this. Usually, um, people feel, and they include in it the fact that they feel very connected to themselves. They feel like there's some stuff that they want to dig deeper into, that they're curious about. Maybe they're also activated. Maybe they were also triggered. But it gives them an opportunity to express where they're at, um, as we are
Mm.
finishing. Um, yeah, like putting a little flag, like I'm here now.
And the I'm here now makes me wonder, how can someone start training the skill or doing it maybe with their colleagues or their families? What are the traps? Maybe where can it go wrong? And what would be your advice to get it started, to play with it?
I think the trap is starting to share everything right away. Um, I think the first step, and this is also the first practice of authentic relating, is welcoming everything. It's starting to notice how I relate with people. Like you just said something to me, like, how does it land for me? Like an internal process. How do I feel? How do I think? What do I sense when I'm with you? For example, it's easy to notice um, when you're drained after a conversation with someone, right? When you
Mm.
leave a conversation, like, oh, wow, right? So, can I get a trailhead of that? Can I start noticing during the conversation when I'm starting to feel drained and just relate with myself about it and welcome it? Be like, oh, I'm noticing that when this person talks to me in this way, I one, two, three, four, just with myself. Um, and start kind of understanding how you're relating and accepting it, and like, oh, okay, I feel insulted by this person, um because as a recovering people pleaser, a lot of times I would be feeling something negative with someone and I would not accept it. I would be like, oh, I shouldn't be insulted, right? Or I shouldn't do this. And we do this to each other also. If someone says I feel guilty, oh, don't feel guilty.
Mhm. Yeah.
Too late. you know? So the first step I would say is being willing to welcome whatever experience that you might be having, because I promise you that whatever experience you're having, it's human. And you are most definitely not the first that has experienced this.
It almost sounds like a meditative practice to really sense what's going on. And this now makes me wonder and curious, how can we relearn that? Because as you said, so often we're told, and I think this starts very early, don't feel this, don't feel angry, don't feel sad. Um, be happy.
And then you
That
collect this bag of things that you're not allowed to be, that you
exactly,
are, but you're not allowed to be.
exactly. And I have the impression that me included, it becomes more and more difficult to really notice how I feel in a situation and to accept that. So, how can I learn that? We learn that.
Um, well, this is where relationships are important, I would say, because in a relationship where you feel safe to bring parts of you that you are uncertain of, that you are not sure that they're okay, and having the other person, someone that cares about you, that understands you, that feels you, and is willing to not just hear you, but hold space for you and, you know, receive you exactly like you receive so many others. Um, and doesn't try to fix you. And that's why it's a practice of relationship because you know what, Miriam, we are social. We need validation. We
Mm,
need acceptance from others. It's not for me, it's not possible to grow only with the meditative practice. That's the first step. But I also have to reveal myself to others, in small amounts and see how it lands. And if it lands positively, then I'll be able to bring more. Um, so I wish I could tell you that you can do authentic relating by yourself. Um, and you can some of it, like you said, the meditative parts, but at some points it's going to have to meet the real world. And that's why we have connection yoga and authenticity gyms so that you can slowly come out into the world and not have to do a headstand on your first in your first try. Um, yeah.
yeah. Thank you. I can see that. And how it's also an opportunity for any relationship to go deeper by daring to open up. Yeah. What's your remaining challenge? Facilitation challenge.
Oof. So many. Um, I think putting myself out there is really hard for me. Um, the practice of putting butts in seats as a facilitator, as a private sector facilitator, someone that does workshops for people, just strangers coming in. Um, it takes for me a lot of energy to be like, hey, what I'm doing is good and you can benefit from it. And I'm good at it. And it will change your life. And doing it in a time where there's financial hardships for people and people aren't really super willing to invest in their relational skills. Um, and saying like, but it's so useful to your life and it's so good and I believe in it fully and look at me, I'm so great in a way. Um, which is in a way what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reveal myself to people. I'm trying to be candid, to put myself out there. And it's terrifying also. I'm terrified of rejection, which continually comes in. And it's hard because there's a big part of me that says like, oh, be gentle with yourself. And there's a big part that says like, I want to make change happen.
Mm,
So I think I don't know if this is the struggle in facilitation, but it has to do with facilitation. Because the work of facilitation for me has been mostly meeting myself and understanding what's important to me, and just meeting my just how sensitive I am and how much I'm terrified of rejection, and slowly overcoming it and meeting it again in a different way. Yeah. Um,
Thank you.
thank you for the question.
I think this speaks to many of us.
Yeah, I
And
feel I just want to say that I feel really tender and sensitive talking about this. I'm noticing like it's really it feels vulnerable to share in front of hundreds of people to that I'm really terrified of rejection, and like it's really impacts me personally when I can't fill seats, or when someone drops out, or when this happens, or like when I have to cancel a workshop. Um, it's really impacts me personally, and the part of me doesn't want to take it personally. And I've gotten better at it. And luckily, I've also gotten better at filling butts and seats, which is an acquired skill. Um, but it feels very, very tender to talk about.
mm,
And I just wanted to reveal that.
thank you. I appreciate that. And it is personal. And there's so many levels to it because I think as a facilitator in the first place, what we offer to groups is very personal. And if we get rejected, how not to take it personal because it's us that we are offering to someone else. And yeah, it doesn't land with everyone. So it's not against us in general, but in this moment, it is something very personal. And then I think, especially when you're creating these spaces to relate authentically, you have to model that and to go in this space, to lead by example, to go first, to be vulnerable, and then not having the appreciation or the fellowship that you would wish for. Yeah. And then if we can grow from it in a positive way through self-acceptance and maybe also empathy and acceptance for the other, that it's not
To-
the place and time for them to go there.
Totally. And I think that the work of authentic relating, the practice uh, that I've been practicing, has created this capacity and space within me. Because I've received so much positive feedback, about myself, about my teachings, um, and have deepened my relationships in ways that I couldn't even imagine. So the trust in the work is a huge pillar that supports me. Even in the days where I'm crying into my pillow that nobody wants to come to my workshop. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's the other part that you mentioned, the money part. That I think it's very difficult, and many facilitators struggle with that. If we believe so much in what we do and that it's helpful, we want to share it with the world, and still we need to make a living. And then this tension between, oh, I'm doing good, can I charge with it? And then all these money beliefs come up and get into our way and also into the way of potential participants. Am I worth that? The
Totally.
self-investment.
Totally. And
Yeah.
that brings up the agenda part, because if I'm coming with an agenda that,
Mm.
you will pay me and do my workshop, and I'm not giving you any agency around it, like I'm doing um uh like 24 hours to sign up, or like I'm using like manipulative tactics, which I'm not against completely. I think it, like, there are some things in it that I see as useful, and at the same time depends on the energy that I'm coming with.
Yes, because I think these 24 hours, for instance, you can see it as a manipulation to create urgency and stress. You can also see it as an invitation, as a nudge, because sometimes we do need a deadline to make up our mind. It's like tossing a coin. You only know what you really want once you see the coin. And you're like, oh
That's
no, this is
true.
actually not the outcome that I wanted. So if there are only 24 hours to sign up for a discount, then at least I have 24 hours to decide, is this really what I want or not?
I agree. I think it's about integrity, and I think it's about getting clear on why we're
Mm.
doing this and what is the, like, what is my true belief around it, or am I coming from a place of low self-worth of like no one's going to sign up if I don't manipulate them into signing up. And it's not that you're aware of this, that's the problem. Sometimes we're not aware of it. Um, and I think what authentic relating, apart from the thing about the agenda and the self-worth, which I think is a big thing around money, um, it's authentic relating. It's like I can be authentic. I can be 100% authentic, but it's not going to relate with you. You wouldn't want to give me your money. You wouldn't want to come to my workshop. Like it's not going to land for you. So continuing to find that balance, because I can be who I am. And this is something that I've kind of spend a lot of time around, of being like, I just want to be who I am. I just want to, I've felt so turned off when I was a child that I couldn't be myself. And when I started to discover myself, I just wanted to be who I am.
Mm.
And we're social species. Like, I want to change in a way that serves me and lands better for you.
Yeah. And what just came up for me while listening is that the most terrifying thing we can do is to be fully ourselves, because I'm just making this up. The moment we get rejected, then we cannot blame the mask or the role we played. No, it's just us.
Totally. Totally. Um, and the fortunate thing around this is that I don't believe we're right or wrong. Like there's nothing wrong with us, there's nothing right with us. We are a mystery coming into form. We're a work of art. So actually failing, actually getting rejected, actually bringing myself and nobody showing up, that's useful information for me. Like this will be painful. Um, and I have tomorrow. I'm not dead. I can understand what happened here, and I can become an even better version of myself, because a better version of myself means a version that people can relate with, because that's what I want. Right? I
Mm.
want to be able to be relatable and for people to relate with me. I don't want to be myself in a vacuum. Yeah,
Yeah. And the positive thing is that if people don't reject you, then they really accept you for who you really are.
which is exactly why I need to welcome things in myself, because if I am so impacted by if people reject me or accept me, that it completely breaks me, then I have no solid ground. It's so beautiful to be accepted and wanted. And um, when you say accept me for who I really am in that moment, right? It's not a blanket acceptance. Like tomorrow, they might not accept something that I do. So it's important that I first am willing to accept myself. And that means accepting my mistakes, accepting that I'm not perfect, that I'm human, and that I'm still worthy and yeah, meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, what comes up is the notion that we first need to hold space for ourselves before we can hold space for others. And the other one, which is maybe even more difficult or easy, haven't made up my mind yet. Very often we judge ourselves, or we fear judgment because we're actually judging ourselves. And I can only speak for myself. I do feel or fear judgment because I'm seeing a part of me that the others might not even see. And if I
It's
can overcome my own judgment, so this full acceptance that you just talked about, if I can accept myself, then I think I would also project less fear of less judgment on others. Does it make sense?
100%. And I also believe that you'll judge others less.
Mm.
If because for me, judging someone else means that there's a part of me that I'm not accepting. Oh, this person is racist, or this person is violent, or this person is this, or this person is a narcissist. How do I relate with my narcissistic parts, with my racist parts? Because let me tell you, we all have them. And if I'm not willing to accept it in myself, I'm definitely not going to be willing to accept it with others. Oh, I'm not like
Mm.
this.
Because then we get angry at others because they actually remind us of these dark parts in ourselves.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's also okay. That's also human.
Mm.
Like, you know, it's not that I need to fully accept myself and love myself before I can even come out and relate with people. But it's like a ping pong. It's like, okay, so I accept this in myself. I'm willing to reveal it a little bit. Oh, it's like 15% of it. Is it okay? Is it accepted? Oh, nice. I'm getting energy and I can accept more about myself. And then I can come out again. It's like a ping pong. Yeah.
I like that. And it feels less daring, similar to what you said in the beginning, how to start the authentic relating practice. Don't reveal everything at once. Don't go all in and then fall flat or risk having expectations or an agenda.
I have a question for you, Miriam. Um, because we've been talking a lot about authentic relating.
Mhm.
Um, and it relates to facilitation, but we haven't talked a lot about facilitation. And I'm curious what you're taking away into facilitation from our conversation so far.
Mm. Hmm. I can answer this question different levels. So, on the maybe more meta level, I think that facilitation as a craft and an art starts with facilitating ourselves and being okay with ourselves. And for me, this conversation is all about that. So, how can we create a better relationship with ourselves, with others? How can we learn to be more self aware through this practice? Receive more information about ourselves through this practice so that we can accept and thereby also accept the groups that we host. And on another level, I wonder and I'm curious how I can use this practice either in relating to participants and groups or to help them relate to each other. And I wonder, yeah, for like conflictual situations where, and I have this a lot, where in the corporate sector, there are teams or different parties and they disagree on something for good reasons. And somehow it doesn't seem as there's sufficient space to be with this disagreement to then discuss it because there's all this personal stuff coming into the way and all these. Is it maybe a fear of losing connection, losing face, losing a position that then doesn't allow colleagues to actually talk about what's relevant in an authentic way.
That's so you have a question that you usually ask, um, and you ask, what make workshops fail, right?
Mhm.
And this for me directly connects to that, because I feel like what make workshops fail is uh, not wanting to make the implicit explicit.
Yes.
And and from what you're sharing right now, what would it be like to bring these imaginations into the realm of explicit? It's like I'm hearing what's going on here, and I'm wondering, is there a fear here of losing position? Is there anger here about this person taking the initiative without asking? Is there this? Is there this? Just us throwing that into the space brings awareness to it. And and it might be that nobody would admit that this is what's going on, and they might like stay in the realm of safety of information, but they will think about it and they will feel it, because that then the question will be, is that what's going, and that opens up.
Yeah. And I think throwing this in and then giving participants the opportunity to break into smaller group and to be in a conversation with each other. So how did it land for me? Um, how much truth do I see in that? Then also creates a safe space for them because you don't need to share this with everyone.
Exactly. And I think you're touching on something that is also really important for workshop is lowering the stakes. Lowering the stakes. If I'm in a breakout room with one other person, the stakes are much lower than if I'm with the whole group. If I'm role playing a scenario, if I'm talking about um, you know, a scenario, not even role playing. Role playing is a little bit higher the stakes. But like if I'm just talking about a scenario of someone else having this is what we just did in
A
the
case
in
study.
the conflict. Yeah, the case
Yeah.
study. So if I bring a case study and I let people brainstorm on the case study, they're gonna project themselves,
Yeah.
of course. But the
Yeah.
stakes are very low because I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about like Thomas in this animal company.
Yeah.
Um, so once I'm able to lower the stakes, people are able to play with these ideas, and inevitably it will reach their conscious mind,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. And you mentioning role play reminds me of this amazing activity we did once in one of your NDB workshops, where you took our three guiding principles, risk, respect, and generosity, and you asked participants to incorporate that, to play out that guiding principle, that value. And I would be curious, what is the what were your intentions and your thoughts behind this activity? Um, and maybe you have done this before. Oh, of course not. Um, because I think that's maybe you can just share your experience and why you did it, and then see, because I think it can be a nice inspiration also for the listeners on how to bring company values into the space in a new way.
Yeah. Um, I joined Never Done Before, so I decided to try something that I've never done before.
Surprise.
Um, and I came into this community that has like I've got my containers, the ones that I set up before every workshop, but this community has their container, right? And I wanted to honor that and also get to know it because these words can mean different things to me, right? And this is all about relationships, right? How do the people in your community relate with each of these words? And that's what I wanted to find out. And so I asked people to take on the roles of these three principles and introduce themselves and to tell us about themselves as the principle. And then through that, I learned how these people and this community relates with these principles. And it gave me so much more information than if I would have presented a container of three words that I personally relate with, maybe in a different way.
I love that. And I wonder whether one could even push it a little bit further to have the principles have conversations with each other to see where does one stop and where does the other start, and what are potential conflicts between these principles, and which one is then stronger is maybe the wrong word, but how do they relate to each other?
I think that is extremely useful because a lot of times in corporate workshops about values, right? And people throw in words, what are our values? But it starts with what my value, how I relate to this value. And because it could be easily like we don't see this in the same way. So we can say this is our value, but I see it in one way and you see it in a completely different way. And then what did we create together?
Yeah.
It's not explicit. It's like, oh, generosity is this for me. Oh, and for me it's actually completely different. Um, and we won't know that until the stakes are high.
Yes, and they're competing against another value, and maybe a value that you have your own value, and then it's the collective versus the personal, the individual.
Exactly. And then how do we bridge that? By revealing it, by putting everything on the table. Only when all the pieces of the puzzle are on the table can we solve the puzzle.
Mm.
If I'm hiding pieces under the table, then we're going to be like, oh, where's this piece? And then the puzzle would not make any sense. And we'll spend hours trying to make this puzzle.
And it's so funny. It's yes, of course. And at the same time, it's so difficult. So why
It's
do
so
we it's so difficult not to hide pieces of the puzzle? And I think it's yeah, again, maybe a cognitive bias because we don't want to be that person who actually holds this piece of the puzzle. Or it's yeah, wishful thinking.
I think that's where the responsibility of the group comes in. The group should want all the pieces of the puzzle to be revealed. And if they're not revealed, then it's no one person's fault for not revealing them. There is a reason that people aren't revealing their puzzle pieces.
Safe space.
Yeah. And we need to take responsibility, not just for my own puzzle pieces, but for everybody's puzzle pieces as a group. And if there's a safe space, if we are actively pursuing a space, a brave space where people have the agency and the safety to come in with what's really going on, um, then all the pieces will be on the table. Otherwise, we're just gonna miss pieces, and then we're gonna play the blame game.
I think this is such a beautiful metaphor and could be a way to yeah, to create shared commitments of this, yeah, through responsibility and agency. And also discuss, okay, what is are we willing to actually solve are we really willing to solve the puzzle? And are we willing to face all the puzzle pieces? Um
Are we willing to face all the puzzle pieces? That's good. If we welcome everything, then yes.
And
But
what if the picture that the puzzle at the end, once we solved it, shows is not the picture that we actually expected? Are we also willing to deal with that?
that will definitely be the case. Yeah, but that's what happens when you deal with human beings. And this is what's also exciting about dealing with human beings, that you can't control anything and they will exceed your expectations.
Yeah. I wonder how we can weave that into a workshop.
Hmm.
Mhm. Food for thought.
Hmm.
Thank you. Is there anything that you would have liked to discuss, but we haven't touched upon?
Hmm. Nothing comes up. I feel like everything that was meant to emerge has emerged. And I can also imagine like speaking to you for hours about this.
Someone wants to learn more
You
about.
is there anything that you feel like?
I feel similar. It's funny how conversations sometimes just have this natural point where it's like, oh, this feels complete,
Hmm.
which doesn't mean that there is not more to discuss or areas that could have been explored deeper.
I imagine that we felt safe to bring all the puzzle pieces.
Mm. I like the picture.
Me too.
If someone wants to take the first steps into authentic relating, wants to either read about it, learn about it, or practice one little thing, what would be your advice?
There are two books out there from two of my mentors, either Conflict Equals Energy um, by Jason Diggs or Authentic Relating by Ryle Castano. Um, I recommend both of them. Um, you're welcome to check me out. Also, follow me um, and either on my website, yanivrose.com, or at Yaniv, the line thing, bottom line, rose bottom line. You'll put the links there.
I put the
Uh,
links in the show
yeah.
notes.
On Instagram, thank you. Um, and you'll find out. I'm doing a live retreat here in Thailand. I just sold it out. I'm very excited. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you so much, especially after talking about all this rejection.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um, and I highly, highly encourage you um, to dive into this work if you're curious, find out more. It will transform your life. And there's nothing I believe in more than this.
Mm,
Hopefully, you've had the experience of me through this. And maybe you can trust me a little bit to take that first step if it resonates for you. Thank you, Miriam.
thank you.
I'm really grateful for being able to express myself to you because I feel really safe and welcomed and loved and appreciated. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you for co-facilitating this conversation.
My pleasure.
Dum, da, da, dum.